If you have a question for tonight's guest, we invite you to call in and join the conversation at 1-855-237-2346. That's 1-855-AF-RADIO. Now, here's Elisa.
It is August 21st, 2022, and we're live on Ancient Faith Radio. This is Elisa Bielotich-Davis with Everyday Orthodox. We get together here on Sunday nights to get to know another everyday Orthodox Christian. We're here to build community through conversation. You know, our Orthodox community can be so fragmented because we worship in different jurisdictions and sometimes in different languages. We live in all different regions. And, you know, I don't know about you, but I have found that I'll meet someone and they'll have like maybe icons on their bracelet or something. And I'll look over and I'll be like, hey, are you Orthodox? And it turns out that like one of my neighbors, one of the moms on my kids' soccer team is actually Orthodox, but because she's in a different jurisdiction, she's in a parish that, you know, I just don't know her. I've never met her. And here I could have had this great Orthodox friend right nearby. So I think it's a lovely thing to get to know people across jurisdictions and really across this whole country. Especially because, you know, our generation, we're working on Orthodox unity, right? And we're going to do it from the grassroots right here on Everyday Orthodox. So I'm really excited about tonight's guest, and I think you will be too. This is an encore guest who's been here before and is so awesome that we invited him back. But before I tell you who it is, I want to remind you that you're welcome to call in with questions if you like. You can join the conversation at 1-855-AF-RADIO. That's 1-855-237-2346. And as always, Matushka Trudy Richter is right here producing our program, and she's taking your calls. So if you've got a question for Christian, just call in and ask her, and Matushka Trudy will put you right through. So tonight's guest is Christian Gonzalez. And if you do any work in youth ministry in the Orthodox Church, you probably know who Christian is. He's the other guy in Y2AM. He's not Steve. He's the other guy. But no, not really. It's actually, I think Christian, personally, I love Christian. Christian's brilliant. Christian is a super smart theologian. He's a family counselor, and he has a really beautiful way of taking very complex, high and important questions and explaining them in a way that everyone can understand and in a way that makes it obvious why it's so important to understand. And so I really enjoy Christian. He's been on the show before, and I don't know if you have any friends like this, but I just have certain friends who I just never get a chance to sit down and talk to them unless I invite them on the show. So that's what I did. I was like, Christian, come back on the show. I miss you. I need to know what's going on with you. So he was here a few years ago, but now we're going to get an update from Christian Gonzalez. Christian, welcome to the program.
Thank you, Lisa. I'm so happy to be back with you. And I do feel bad for, first of all, anyone who just has to listen in on this, because it really is like mostly just a chance to hang out with you. So.
It's just an opportunity to catch up.
Yeah. So everybody stand by while we talk about the latest season of Stranger Things, and it's
That's right. Exactly. No. But actually, you know, it's funny that you mentioned that, because you also were one of the stars of Pop Culture Coffee Hour, which has been a really beloved podcast here on Ancient Faith that you did through Y2AM. And that was you and Steve talking about all different pop culture stuff, except for the weeks when the girls were on instead of you guys. But so, you know, that's actually quite relevant to the conversation. If we were to talk about Stranger Things, it would be like picking up Pop Culture Coffee Hour. So see, there's nothing off the table here.
We're not going to do that. Yeah,
we're not going to do
that because Pop Culture Coffee Hour is over. It's done.
That's right.
You can go
it's
back
behind
to the
you.
archives and listen to 200 episodes.
It was a good show. It was a good show.
Fun.
It was very good. It was a lot of fun. And you guys, so Christian worked at Y2AM for, how long were you at Y2AM? 10 years?
Oh, I think 7 years.
Long?
I think so. 7? I started, I think, in 2000. I want to say
13 or 14.
Right before right before our middle daughter was born. So she was born in 2015. Yeah, so I started in April of 2015 and just ended at the end of June of this year. Yeah. So
until just lately. And so that used to be called the Department of Youth and Young Adult Ministry at the GOA, at the Greek Orthodox Church. And Steve Christoforou and Christian and their team sort of rebranded everything as Y2AM and produced a bunch of great podcasts and videos and wonderful things. And people are familiar with Be the Bee and The Trench and all of that. And you guys put out so much great material. And now you have moved on to a project that I'm really excited about, because And correct me if I'm wrong, but what I'm thinking is that this is like a larger pan-Orthodox version of the same sort of thing where you'll be producing resources for people doing youth and young adult ministry in the Orthodox Church in America, but not associated with just the one jurisdiction, but like you're associated more with the assembly now, and it's a bigger project. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, no, so that's exactly right. Our agency that is under the assembly, which was actually, believe it or not, and I hope that people understand how miraculous this is when I say that it was unanimously approved by every bishop in the Assembly of Bishops. I mean,
Wow.
it's amazing that this was something that every bishop saw the need for, because their pastoral hearts obviously were on fire when it came to our youth and our young adults, and they perceived, as many people have perceived. It's not like anyone listening to this podcast has been feeling like, I think our church is doing really great retaining young people, and it doesn't seem like we're bleeding at all. But our bishops, as well as you, as well as those of us who, when I was formerly at Y2AM, we saw that something like 60 to 90% of young people were at some point falling away from their faith, from leaving the church for various reasons. And the bishops thought, you know what, we need to do something about this. We see that this is indeed truly a significant issue that needs to be addressed. And so the idea there emerged of creating some kind of agency that could combine the talents and resources from all over the Orthodox world in America to somehow unify processes and curricula, and have different trainings and retreats, different things for priests, youth workers, and parents. Really, because the more that I think about kind of how ministry happens. So, I've worked in youth ministry in various capacities, right? I've done the camp thing, I've done the parish thing, I've done stuff at the archdiocesan level. I've been all over, and more I realize how much of the work that's done is really done on the ground in those face-to-face relationships, in the things that happen day to day, right? Like I don't know that stuff produced at a mass level or at a high level, kind of from the archdiocese, or even from Orthodox Youth Ministries, OIM, which is the assembly agency, is going to have the capacity to necessarily, it'll help people, I hope, but to really directly impact and change people's lives, that happens in that personal encounter, right? In the face-to-face thing, where somebody's spoken to our lives through a relationship that we trusted. And my hope is that what OIM can do is really to kind of stand in there and help pastors, help youth workers, help parents really become who God has made them to be, as the primary place that young people encounter the presence of God in their lives. Like that could be to me, I think, a really powerful thing that could happen. And I think that's what the assembly was hoping would happen when they declared 2021 the year of youth, to really devote themselves to this larger question of ministry with youth and young adults, and how do we do it. And that's where OIM came out of. OIM was the crowning achievement of this year of devotion to young people and to youth and young adult ministry. And again, like I said, thank God it was unanimously approved by every bishop in the assembly. It's really a remarkable ending to a remarkable year.
It is. It's beautiful. Thank God. Thank God. Well, and it is, it's interesting, right? Because when you think about your average parent volunteer who wants to help, right? A lot of times people are thinking, yes, I'll bring the pizza and we'll get the kids together. And, do you have a video or something we can show them? And all of that can be great, right? But that's not what is going to keep people in church. Tell us a little bit more about how and why you're seeing that it's really about this relationship. Because honestly, like, if for people who are maybe youth volunteers listening, maybe not trained youth directors, people who didn't go to like the seminary and take the classes and stuff, but people who are just helping out, that's a huge job to be the presence of Christ in someone's life. It sounds intimidating. I think in the end, it actually isn't that intimidating if you really think about what it means. But I would just, tell me more about this, and because I remember you over the years, like Christian and I go way back. And I was at like 2011 or something that I heard these recordings. You were talking about kids and how they operate and relationships back then as well. But over the years, you've really been looking at ministry and how we're doing it. And there are little things that you've said over the years that really strike me. And one of them, you were saying, sometimes you look at youth ministry activities and it's like being an extrovert is the same thing as being a good Christian, because being good at this, like playing all these icebreakers and doing all these games and running around and, answering questions that you're being peppered with or whatever, like these are all things that are really social skills and it's about extroversion. It really doesn't have a lot to do with Jesus. Like it doesn't have a lot to do with really growing spiritually. And so there's a way that with young people, we try to entertain them. We try to, make things fun for them. And then, and then we eventually lose them. And it's like, well, why did we lose them? What did we do wrong? Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. I mean, so there's probably a lot kind of going on in there, I
my apologies. Not a clear question.
No. It's, we're going to just talk and we're going to see what happens. Again, this is mostly an excuse for you and I to hang out and everyone just has to bear with it. So it's fine.
That's right. Sorry, guys.
Deal with it, y'all. But I think that, the relational thing, when Jesus calls people, he doesn't go out saying, look, I need a treasurer. And even the guy he got wasn't like a really great recruit, right? Like
Yes.
So
I love how you put things, Christian. This is why you're always my favorite speaker to have, because you're right. He was not a great recruit.
No, he wasn't.
These apostles he picked would be terrible treasurers. They're lousy at this.
Yes.
Who's doing the minutes?
Yeah. And I think a lot of the times, like our youth work has been based around kind of like the parliamentary processes and all these kinds of things, which is, again, fine. And there's a place for these things. I don't mean to decry them in any way. Like, I think that they're really beneficial and they help maintain order and they get things done. But I think when you get to the question of, what Christ is calling people to is a life of discipleship, right? A life of following him, a life of being with him, of knowing him, of seeing what he does and kind of becoming more and more like him. And this doesn't happen in a program, right? It happens in the course of knowing Jesus Christ. And one of my favorite sayings from the Desert Fathers, and forgive me, I forget which father it is. I think it might be John the Dwarf, but he says, keep close to Jesus. Like, that's the saying, is keep close to Jesus. And those 4 words are so powerful to me in terms of, what if they were serious about that? Like, what if when Jesus says that the most important commandments, the most important thing that you can do is love? What if Jesus meant it when he said that it's by your love that all men will know that you're my disciples? And to me, that question of love is not something you can teach someone, right? Like, that question of love is something that you can show someone, is something that you can enter into. It's a space. It is the cosmic reality in which we exist. And that's not something that happens through teaching points. It's something that happens at the dinner table. It's something that happens, on your way to the grocery store. It's something that happens when you're sitting there at camp and one of your young people says, hey, I really need to tell you something. And they have no one else who's listened to them. So I do think that, this emphasis on relational ministry is, we believe it, really, one of the things that I think is the most powerful about the Christian faith is this idea of incarnation, right? That, like, this God that we follow and love and obey is one who did not stand far off, but who became like us in everything except sin, who came and dwelt in our neighborhood, who tented among us, who died the death that we die. And so he knows everything about what it is to be human in a very incarnate way. And I just don't think, just because Jesus of Nazareth is no longer incarnate standing in our midst, that we still can't incarnate that same word of God in one another's lives. And I think that's how transformation happens. That's how change occurs, is through these loving relationships. So I am very interested, I think, personally and professionally. I mean, in another world, I'm also a licensed marriage and family therapist. So like, there is something very particularly fascinating to me about the human person in the role of God's economy and what that looks like for the salvation of the world. What does it actually mean for young people to be transformed into being like God? But not only that, what does it mean for priests and youth workers to be transformed into being like God? So I do think that personal thing, that relational touch, whatever it may be, I mean, that's really the place where divine action, I think, is most palpable.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, I think about camp, right? And there is a lot of administrative, you have to have the facilities, and there's all kinds of insurance, and there's a lot of training, and there are all of these different things going on. But the beautiful thing that happens at camp is these conversations, right? Where a priest or a youth worker or two campers are sitting together and they're just having like an honest, lovely conversation, and they care about each other and they're interested. They're offering friendship and a listening ear. And it's not something you teach someone, it's something you show someone. That's exactly right. And I really found your podcast, We Are Orthodoxy, which is archived on Ancient Faith, to be just so brilliant. Because I remember when you started it, you were saying, we keep talking about why young people leave the church. What if we listened instead? Like, let's just get a bunch of young people and just interview them. And it was a show kind of like this, right? Where you just let them start talking. And they're talking about their lives, and they're telling the story of how they loved church when they were in high school, or, they came back and forth or whatever. And then they go off to college and they're walking into strange parishes where they don't know anyone. And the thing that was, I think, so striking is that I think that we are walking around assuming, oh, these terrible liberal universities have done this, or they lived in the big city and they got real secular or something like that. But what you hear from the kids is not ideologically, I decided not to be religious anymore. What you hear instead is, I didn't belong anymore. I wasn't being fed in these parishes or in this place, but I was being fed somewhere else, perhaps, or I was really lonely and I was floating around. But generally speaking, what I was hearing was a lot of people who really still loved Jesus, who loved the church, who yearned for a time when they were comfortable and happy in the church, and were sad to be kind of wandering in exile. And it was so fascinating to me, because I don't think that's what people are assuming is causing people young people to kind of fade away and to wander off. Is that what you were hearing? And I mean, I'm sure you, being a trained a trained counselor there, and you're doing all of the interviews, and I probably only heard most of the interviews. What was your takeaway from all of those conversations? Like, what did you learn about young adults and why they're going?
Man, this is really, I think, a fantastic question, and one that remains, I think, somewhat elusive in terms of like a really concrete answer to, right? Because I think every young adult obviously is going to be different. But I do feel like there was some trends among the people that I spoke with, that, for lack of a better way of putting it, they were wondering, and this is why I think I keep coming back to this question of like, what if Jesus was serious when he said that it's by your love that all men will know? The question they were asking is, where's the love? Like I've heard a lot about what it means to be good, and how I can be accomplished in this thing, and how there's something that's like asked of me and it takes an effort. I've heard a lot about those things, but is this really making me a more loving person to my neighbors, to people I disagree with, to people who like people who disagree with me? And I do think that so maybe the best way to say it is this. I have a friend who has said to me that his like hypothesis as to why young people leave the church is because they have too much integrity to stay, which I think is a very like indicting
Ouch.
comment. I know, yeah, they have too much integrity to stay, and by that he means they're coming to church, they're listening to the gospel, They're hearing the way that Jesus talks about loving our neighbors. They're hearing the way that he talks about, giving. If someone asks you to walk 1 mile, you walk 2. If someone asks you for your tunic, you give them your cloak as well. If someone asks, whatever it is, right? Like that, there's always this, literally the next mile that you're called to go, and it's always manifesting this law of love. And as they look around, I really do think they come back to that question of where is the love? One person we interviewed in particular talked about how his parish, just over time, it wasn't even like a bitter thing. There was no resentment or anything like that, but he saw that his parish was far more preoccupied with planning for their food festival or whatever. And down the road in the adjacent neighborhood, there was a school district that had like a 50% dropout rate by the end of sophomore year of high school. And he was like, how is it that the people who say that they follow Jesus are more concerned with food, but the people who don't follow Jesus seem to be more concerned with the things that Jesus was concerned about? And I don't think that's an unfair question. So I do think that there is some level of, when push comes to shove, like, are we more concerned with our programs and our cultures, or are we more concerned with the persons that God has put in our midst? And I think that that's a really big question for young people these days. How is this a practical faith that actually makes a difference in the world?
Yeah. Well, and I think that's true. I think that there's, be careful how well you teach the gospel, right? If they're coming in and they're really learning the gospel, they're going to look to you to live the gospel. And I think in a lot of ways, Orthodox people are very charitable in quiet, personal ways. And then you don't see it in the parish structure as much. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes, that seems very fair to me.
I've seen a lot of, coming in through the Serbian church, right? The parish itself didn't do any kind of, I don't know, there was no soup kitchen. There's no concern about anything like that going on as a parish. But then as individuals, you'll see, a new immigrant comes into town and they're making sure that he has a house and he has a couch and he has all these things. And so it was interesting because there is so much generosity and love, but it does not always show itself in the parish. And I think it's true that like kids want to see that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we want to see that. We want to see that manifestation of love, that incarnation of love, right? Like actual physical something happening in front of me that speaks love. And we don't always see that in our parishes. And that's a big challenge for parishes. It's hard. I know in our parish, we're struggling to get this building built and we have our Greek festival and we're trying to get this education building and it's all wonderful and it's great. But, we're not doing those other things. And a lot of Orthodox churches aren't. Some are, but a lot of Orthodox churches are not. And I think that really is an important question. Like, in what ways
I think that you brought it up
out?
Really. Sorry, I'm sorry to interrupt you. And I think you're saying it really well, right? It's not to say that those things aren't happening. It's just that when we push the curricula of the church is XYZ thing, those aren't the things that usually we say are the curricula of the church, right? Like when we have a catechesis that we're doing, and we don't say, okay, here's the catechesis, is we're going to all help this immigrant who's coming into the town to like make sure that they have a fully furnished apartment by the time they get here. Like that is if that were the curricula of the church, I think we'd all be like, what? Or what are we, what are we getting into here? But instead it's like we focus on kind of questions of like, the hypostatic union and the church councils. And that's not to say that these things aren't important. But the question I think that I tend to have, and I think that a lot of young adults have, is, are those the most important questions? Are those the number one questions that Jesus Christ seemed concerned with? And when you look at the scriptures, when you read the gospels, by and large, like not really. He talks about love and caring for our neighbor, for uniting ourselves to God, to following Him. Like these are the things that he says over and over and over and over and over again. Even today's gospel reading was, the epileptic who had some sort of demon, and the disciples couldn't cast it out. And he says to him, this kind can't come out except by through prayer and fasting. And, very clearly what you end up seeing there is that prayer and fasting become the capacity for us exorcising demons in the world. There's this link in the entire spiritual life of the church. Prayer and fasting don't just happen for the sake of themselves. They happen for the sake of casting out demons. And this is, I think, where young people are kind of scratching their heads going, okay, so how are we casting out demons? How are we casting out the oppressive powers of the evil one? And I think at least on a mass scale, they're confused by what our response to that is.
Yeah, I think that's true. Well, it's funny when you mention, these higher questions of theology, right? It is interesting that we put those in our catechesis. And I think in some ways that's a very American thing because, we have all these different denominations and you have to know, you have to have like this rational understanding of what all the dogma is and what all the teachings are. And that's great. But there's also another kind of faith that we see in the saints. And we see, I don't know, like I love Saint Euphrosynos, but there are these saints who are unlettered, right? And they're just really loving. And there are these beautiful saints who, if you ask them what they believe, they'll say, I believe what the church believes. Like they trust the church to represent God. They're not concerned about like the essences and the energies and how the Trinity works and all of that. They're much more likely to say, that's a mystery that I'm not meant to fully be able to articulate. And that's fine with me. And their real life is lived feeding people, taking care of people, loving one another, and existing in prayer, in fasting, and in service. And so, I mean, there is a way that in our catechism, we do get it, I love Sunday school. I'm a Sunday school director. I think it's great, but I have a tendency, not to want to get into too much of that really high theology or church history and all that. Like, that's really interesting to a lot of people. To a lot of people, it's not. But ultimately, like you can live a very valuable and wonderful Christian life without knowing any of that stuff, which is not to say that the church should abandon it. But, for the average lay person operating, the key is really, are you serving everyone? Do you love everyone? Do you respect everyone? Are you taking care of people? It's really not, how do you weigh in on the various councils of the church and do you understand what each and every one of them meant? You know, but
Exactly.
that's always kind of a pet peeve of mine with Sunday school because there are always people like, how come you're not teaching more church history? Like they have to know it. And it's like, I'm not sure they need to know it. Like, I'm not sure that all of the beautiful babushkas out, in the small towns all understood all of that, but they have beautiful faith. So I think we're going to be okay. But,
and I think that's it, like I think about, like St. Porphyrios and like as he's walking through the woods and he hears a nightingale singing and like, this is his encounter with Christ. I mean, it's a remarkable moment in the book Wounded by Love when he hears this nightingale singing and he's smitten with love. And later you get to this point of him saying, like, if you wish to become a Christian, you must first become a poet, right? And there's this stoking of the flames of love, the stoking and this is what beauty does for us, right? Beauty is what really opens us to desire and opens us to love in this amazing capacity that is far beyond the reaches of what church history can do. Like, church history is really, really interesting and really important to know. And I hope I'm being clear about this. Like, these are not bad things to know,
right.
But they just
like
they
Christian
just
went to seminary. Like, really, he knows the stuff. Like, he doesn't think it's
They're
stupid.
not.
No, but it's
No, I
true,
like the
right?
things.
There's like what is necessary for your day-to-day life. Well, it's the same thing as like knowing world history, right? Like a certain base amount is really great for everyone to know, but we don't all have to be historians. We don't all have to be like PhD level knowledge about everything that's ever happened to live a really good and quality life, right? Like, that's why we're not teaching our 4-year-olds about it. But
and I think that Dr. Al Rossi in his book Becoming a Healing Presence, like I'm going to misquote it, but it's something to this extent, where he says, that the Christian is kind of simply the person who has learned to find Christ in everything. And that to me is, I'm like, that's it. That is catechesis. Like if you can find Christ in everything, if we just spent less time trying to prove our doctrines about him and spent more time trying to show young people how he is filling everything, then the doctrines would make sense. Of course he's God. Of course he's love. Of course you know what I mean? Like if we could show that he is somehow in the song of the nightingale, and this is why I brought St. Porphyrios into it, that like he had this sense, if we could teach our young people to be poets, to look at a candle and see, you know, as it's lit, that itself is emblematic of the light of Christ. I mean, you look at icons, essentially they all look like candles. You know what I mean? Like the people are these wicks that are like the conduit of this fire that they're glowing with. I mean, like next time you look at a candle, like think about how it looks like an icon. You know, you're going to be like, oh, you're right, it totally does. And so if you can begin to see the connection of Christ with the fire of the candle, if you can see the connection of you know, you go to the liturgy and what do you see in there, right? We see water in the baptismal font. We see earth laid out on the table in the form of bread and wine. We see air there in the form of the smoke, and we see fire, water, and fire, right, in all of the candles and all of this stuff. You do begin to see the four elements of medieval creation, and so everything in the world, at least in medieval thought, is considered to exist because of these four elements: fire, water, earth, and wind. And we have every single one of them in the divine liturgy. So you tell me that all of creation is somehow not a temple that is filled with the presence of God. What if our Sunday school curricula was based on teaching people to see that? How is everything filled with the presence of Christ? I mean, what if we really, and this is what Pop Culture Coffee Hour, what we took seriously was that prayer, right? Spirit of truth, everywhere present, filling all things. Everywhere present, filling all things. All right, let's put that to the test. You know, like right. let's really see. Let's really see, is he actually everywhere present and filling everything? Everything.
I love that. I love that. Okay, we're going to take a short break, Christian, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk more about this, because now we need to go train all of our Sunday school teachers to be poets, and we can find a way. But we're going to be right back after this short break.
Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich Davis will be back in a moment. Give Elisa and her guest a call at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO.
Did you know that you can find children's books from Ancient Faith Publishing on Audible, including the bestseller Spiridon's Shoes?
Where is your home, Abba? Spiros asked curiously. Ah, my young friend, the true home of my heart is with Christ Jesus, and you will always find me in his house. Abba closed his eyes again, his prayer rope moving through his gnarled fingers as he continued his silent prayer. Are you a monk, Abba? Spiros asked, confused by the answer. I am a shepherd, Spiros, and you must return now before you are missed. Spiros nodded. I hope I will see you again soon, Abba. I have the same hope. Until then, Spiros, may God bless you.
The Spiridon's Shoes audiobook is available at audible.com. You can purchase the paperback and find links to the ebook and audiobook at store.ancientfaith.com. That's store.ancientfaith.com.
We're back with Everyday Orthodox with Elisa Bielatich Davis. Do you have a question for Elisa and today's guest? Call in now at 855-237-2346. That's 855-AF-RADIO. Here again is Elisa.
And welcome back to Everyday Orthodox. We're here tonight with Christian Gonzalez. And of course, you're welcome to call in if you like. It's 1-855-AF-RADIO, 1-855-237-2346. And Christian is the new director of ministry, which it sounds like something out of Harry Potter every time I hear it. But he's the director of ministry at the new Orthodox, what's OYM, Orthodox Youth Ministry? It's
correct, yeah.
Like the new pan-Orthodox, wonderful youth ministry group, and I'm super excited about it. And I think listening to Christian for this first half hour, you can already tell why he was selected for this job. But Christian, you brought up two of my favorite people, St. Porphyrios and Al Rossi, because they're just both they're both brilliant, right? And they both say such lovely things. And you know, you were just talking about how we're meant to be these wicks that shine forth with Christ's light like candles. And it reminded me of the lamps in the Monday and Tuesday during the bridegroom services of Holy Week, we talk about the virgins with the lamps and how Christ talks about how, that you have the 10 virgins and 5 of them have the oil and 5 of them don't have the oil. And then the ones without oil ask for oil and the other ones can't give it to them. And I remember I've always heard that and thought, why are they not sharing their oil? Like, if it means someone else's salvation, why would you not share your oil? Why is Jesus suddenly not suggesting that we share with one another, but instead it's like, sorry, get your own oil. You're going to miss the bridegroom. But it was so beautiful because it caused me to look it up. And it's because the oil, according to the fathers, I forget which fathers, but there were a few fathers talking about it. The oil is virtue. It's all of the good works that you've done. It's the love and the service that you've given. And so I can't build that in you. You have to build it yourself by doing those beautiful things. And so, I'm always telling my kids and my Sunday school kids exactly that, this idea that that's who you are. You're a lamp and you're the wick. And like your good works and all of the love that you're showing others is going to be oil that builds up and allows you to shine the light of Christ. And that's who we're meant to be, right? Like we're meant to be a lamp unto the world. We're meant to shine forth with, then St. Porphyrios, he was talking to parents, telling some parent, how to be a good parent. And he's like, well, just become a saint, which is easy. And he's like, do you radiate Christ? When you talk to your children, do you radiate Christ? And I just, that idea of radiating Christ, that idea that we are called to radiate Christ and like, what would that look like? And so I'm always asking my kids, like, what is that? Who do you know that radiates Christ, right? And it's always like some wonderful little old lady or little old guy in church who smiles and he has these beautiful bright eyes, or and he's kind and he's giving you like maybe a weird hard candy or something. And it's like, but that's all it is, right? Like it sounds so hard, but it's so simple, really. But that's my rant. That's my rant about who we need to be as youth ministry workers, I feel, right? Like we have to understand that we're those lamps and that every person is called to be that. And if we're not showing them the love of Christ while they're in church because their parents are bringing them every week, if they're not seeing the light of Christ in church, then they're not gonna look to the church to find the light of Christ later when they're in the darkness, But anyways, that's
totally
my rant. But I wanted to say, so you're saying that you're wanting to sort of help pastors and youth ministry workers focus on this relational aspect of ministry, which I think is all those other aspects are simply there so that you can have a way to be relational, right? Like to give you a framework, the only reason we need summer camp is that we can bring all of these kids into one place so that we can sit down and get to know them and love them and talk to them and pray with them and pray for them. And so like, what exactly will you guys be doing then? Are you going to do like training events and workshops? What are you going to do?
This is an awesome question and a fantastic one. So I kind of want to back up just a little bit, maybe to kind of give a little context for kind of how I'm about to answer the question. So first of all, at OYM, and as we've been putting all of this together, so we've been really in the initial phases of starting all of this, right? I mean, this was approved in October of 2021. I was just hired July 1st of 2022. So today is August 21st. So I haven't even been working for OIM for 2 months fully yet. So we're still kind of in the process of doing a lot of building and all of that. We have a website even coming up soon. It'll be launched on September 1st, and you can find that at orthodoxyouthministries.org. So the reason I say all of this is because we are still very much building who we are and what we're going to do. But the primary thing that I think we're really hoping to help, pastors, youth workers, parents, young adults, teenagers, whatever, the main thing we really want to help people figure out is how to become who God made them to be. I mean, really, at the end of the day, that is what we want to do. How do we help you figure out and become who God made you to be? As a perfect reflection and a perfect representation of his likeness on the planet. And part of the way, I think that we're hoping to do that is to, at least what we imagine, is passing on a faith to youth and young adults where every single one of them knows how to encounter Christ, how to embody his church, how to be his presence in the world, and then how to engage his name and how to engage that world in his name. I mean, that really is what we're hoping for, is to help people encounter Christ, embody his church, and engage the world in his name. And so that's kind of the big picture of what we're shooting for. And so through, some of the work that we did at Y2AM, the Effective Christian Ministry course, I don't know if you've ever taken it, Elisa, but
I have
if anyone
taken
is out
it.
there.
I've taken it, and it's awesome. And my parish is going to do a cohort this year. But
Wonderful.
If anyone hasn't seen this, and so one thing that was really interesting is, I've known Christian for years, and Steve as well. So as I'm reading it, there's a lot of things that we've talked about over the years that I knew about, but I was thrilled to see a bunch of people in my parish take it this summer. And they're all just like, this is blowing my mind. Like, I've just never thought about anything this way. So if you're listening and you are at all involved in youth ministry, or you're interested in it, the Effective Christian Ministry program is super neat. And so is it effectiveministry.com? What is it?
Yeah, effectivechristianministry.org, I think is the URL. So you can hop on over there, and
it's awesome.
You can put in your
It's
information.
So
I think there's some sort of price. I think it's like $75 maybe to take the course. But I do know a lot of people have benefited from it, and really putting it together was, for me, like one of the highlights of my work in ministry. Working with Steve to put this thing together, that we felt like this is the synthesis of so much of our learning over the last 6-7 years, or however long it was when we first put it out.
It's like a thesis. It's like the Y2AM thesis, right? It's like, we did all this research into all these different areas, and here's how it all comes together, and we're going to hand it to you and equip you to really serve people by loving them and showing them Christ. It's gorgeous. It's awesome. It's fantastic. I can't recommend it enough.
Well, thank God.
But
thank God.
So you were referencing that in terms of what you're doing now.
Yeah. So part of the reason, the way that we're thinking about how do we help people do those 3 E's, right? Encountering Christ, embodying his church, and engaging the world in his name. Well, part of the conversation that, we had been having, and that ECM really touched into, was these 5 basic needs that we kind of came across in terms of young people and their religious lives. And a lot of this was taken from those interviews on We Are Orthodoxy. That the number one need that young people have, that we discerned, and maybe we can back up on it, but the number one need that we discerned was that young people need to know Jesus Christ. They need to know who this person is that they're following, because, again, as I've even said, a program can't teach that. Only personhood can. Only the relational can. And as we come to know this, this man, Jesus Christ, this God man, in so doing, we fulfill the second need, which is we come to know ourselves in him. We come to know who we truly are, our authentic identity, right? That can be found in him. And as we are a group of people who collaboratively do that and help one another discover that, then we find our full belonging. This is the third need. We find our full belonging in the community of the church. The full community. I think a lot of times, you and I have talked about this before, Elisa, on multiple occasions, that we tend to treat, young people, children, almost as like junior Christians, right? We kind of like say, okay, you can come to this part of the thing, but then you have to like go off to Sunday school, and like the grown-ups are going to go to coffee hour, and like you guys got to go learn the thing, and we're going to all have a really nice time and relax after that really long service and whatever. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Sunday school, but I think that what we begin to internalize is a sense of them and us when it comes to youth and young adults, and then the rest of us, the rest of the community of the body of Christ. So our feeling is that as we all come to know who we are in Christ, that those young people will find themselves belonging to the full community. And as they do that, they will live into a beautiful narrative. They'll find themselves with a faith that actually makes a difference. They'll be empowered to live differently, seeing who they really are. And then as they do that, then we can, this is the fifth need, we can equip them with the witness of the church. We can entrust them with this living tradition that says, the thing that you're doing right now, this is the thing that God's people have been doing for ages and ages. Amen. Like,
yes.
But we often kind of, I think, start at the end and say like, well, what does the church teach about this? And what does the church have to say about that? And I don't think that that's bad. I really don't think that it's bad. Like I said, I think that is a need. I'm just not convinced, and maybe I'm wrong, and I'm okay being wrong about this, that maybe it's not the primary need is to teach people what the church says. The first thing is to help them come to know Christ. So all of that.
Yeah,
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. No, I was just going to say, it reminds me of that story about the rabbit, right? Like all the dogs, one dog sees a white rabbit and he starts chasing the rabbit. And then all the other dogs start chasing him and they're all running and they're barking. And then after a while, the chase gets too long and all the other dogs fall away. But the one rabbit keeps chasing, or the one dog keeps chasing. And it's because he really saw the rabbit and he knew the rabbit. So he knew there was a rat. The other ones were just following along and then they got tired and stopped. And it's this idea that, like, if you know Christ, if you understand what the purpose of the Christian life is, which is to grow closer to Christ and to be filled with him, like once you see that, you're going to keep pursuing that because you're going to love that and you're going to understand how beautiful that is. But if we're just expecting everybody to just run along with us without showing them the rabbit, right? Like if it's all about the run and it's all about the chase and here's how you do all these things without them seeing what the real goal of it is, without them really understanding who Christ is and tasting it for themselves, then they're not gonna keep up that race for long because they don't understand what the real heart of it is. And it's because that's the hard thing to teach. A lot of times we teach that easier stuff, but what does the church say about this?
Yeah.
What is the church, what is the symbolism of this? And all of that is really good because there were also generations who were like sitting in liturgy and weren't sure what it was. And that's lousy, right? Like we definitely want the kids to understand all of that. But the truth is you have a whole lifetime to learn that stuff. But if we don't, while we have them, teach them, if we don't show them how to have like an encounter with Christ, if they don't meet Christ and love Christ, they're not going to, all the church history, all the liturgics, all the everything is not going to help, right? Like I think you're so right. That's really the core. That's the main thing. But okay, go on. Sorry.
Yeah, no, so I'm with you. I think that it's not a question of whether or not those things are important. It's a question of where they fall, in teaching, or at least growing our young people to know Christ, right? I mean, there's a reason that the song that we, sing to our children as they go to bed is "Jesus loves me, this I know." Like intuitively, we understand, like they need to know that they are beloved. We wouldn't start with like singing the creed to them as they go to sleep.
Right.
The creed is really
right?
important,
Feed
but it's
me
not
milk and then meat.
yeah,
right.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. You need to know that you are seen and loved by your Lord.
It's
like
true.
that's where
Everything
it starts.
in its order, right? Like orthodoxy is all about like orderliness in a sense. And we get out of order when we start at the end, and then we really have to start at that very, very, very beginning. Okay, keep going. What were you saying?
Yeah. So in terms of like how we want to do that, one of the things that that we did at Y2AM is we tried to offer content that was kind of regularly available to people, kind of like on a plug and play level, right? So there was B2B stuff in the Trench and Pop Culture Coffee Hour and We Are Orthodoxy and Live the Word and Wandering the Desert, just all these different things that we hoped we could put out in terms of videos and podcasts that would somehow be encouraging to people to help them come to know Christ. So that's kind of like the first level, I think of what we're hoping to do at OYM is to put out some kind of content. But the content that we want to put out is primarily stuff that is going to help people kind of lean into one of those 3 E's, right? To encounter Christ, to embody his presence in the world, or to engage the world in his name. We want to help people do those things because that to us seems to kind of encapsulate what following Jesus Christ is all about. And we're going to do that hopefully by focusing on these 5 needs: to know Jesus Christ, to know who oneself is in relationship to him, to belong to the community of the church, to be empowered with a faith that makes a difference, and to be entrusted with the witness of the church. These are the things that we're hoping in all of our content to kind of direct to consumer, for lack of a better way of putting it, do. So some of the ideas, that we have that we're tossing around, or some different podcasts about like, okay, what if we did something on a daily basis that would help people lean into this kind of the sense of becoming aware of Christ's presence literally every day. if we could have some sort of meditation. And I do think that, again, like I said, this is the first need that I think we need to help people meet, is to help them find him in everything. And, I do sort of tend to more and more believe that if we spent more time with youth and young adults, showing them how Christ is everywhere present, rather than making an argument for why this or that Orthodox teaching is the best, I do really think we would get further with them. Again, I'm not saying that we shouldn't teach them why this or that Orthodox teaching is best. I think if we just started, if we started with let's find him in the song of the bird. Let's find him in the blowing of the wind. Let's find him in the lighting of the candle. Let's find him in the face of our neighbor. Or even young adults who are out there with children who wake up trying to say their prayers, and their children wake up as soon as they do. I mean, this happens. I've got 3 young daughters, and I can't get a quiet time in to save my life, because if I get up at 5:15, they're up at 5:15. If I get up at 5:30, they're up at 5:30. If I get up at 4:45, they're up at 4:45. It just doesn't matter.
Oh my gosh, that's exactly what happened in my house. That's exactly
yes.
It didn't matter. Didn't matter.
And then I'm like, if we're like, don't you understand? I'm trying to spend time with God. Like, we missed the point. right? Like, we totally missed the point. Instead
then
of being like,
God,
oh, wait a minute.
Yeah.
Who is God to them? And also, who is God to us? Can I not, in this moment, venerate the icon of God in my child, who is up at 4:45, just like I am, to be with God? Like, can I be with this child as if they are God? Can that become this moment of where my consciousness shifts to say, this also is God? This, the God is in the very foundation of this moment. And can I respond to this with his energy of love and welcome and joy? My child, here you are. Come sit on daddy's lap. And how was your sleep? That can become a moment of prayer if I let it be. But if we're really stuck to trying to say, XYZ thing, then we might miss the point of what could happen there. So I do think that there's something there in terms of content that we're hoping that we can walk with people in doing, to just say, hey, as you're walking outside and you feel the heat of the sun on you, become aware that this is the sun's energy, and you're not in the sun, but you're feeling the sun. Can this be a moment of becoming aware of God's presence as if it were the heat of the sun? That to me is, I think, that could be a really powerful way to just move our consciousness just a little bit more towards this Jesus Christ, to this Holy Spirit that we say is everywhere present and filling all things. So that's kind of one level of what we're hoping to do. The second is, as I said, we're really interested in the personhood of the priest, of the pastor, of the youth worker, of the parent, of the youth and the young adult. So there is some level, I think, of even just trainings and retreats that we're hoping to do, both in person and online. I personally, I'm really, really interested in the spiritual renewal of pastors and youth workers, because I do know that the rate of burnout is incredibly high for youth workers and pastors. I mean, the average career of a youth pastor, I think, is 2 years. They don't last long. Someone who's in a youth director position.
That's true.
And so
that's true.
Yeah, they don't last long. So my hope is what if? And it's tough because everyone agrees this is the hardest question, hardest nut for us to crack, is what do we do with youth and young adults? And then we have a new person every 2 years, and it's the newest person who's just out of seminary or maybe didn't go to seminary, and we're expecting them to do the most work with the hardest demographic. It just seems
well, they're young, so they'll be good with young people, right? I'm sure this is going to work. It's so hard. It's so hard, but it is really hard. And it's also, I think, important for the parish to adjust how they are going to rate. How are you going to determine whether your youth director is doing a good job? Right. Because that's a whole other ball of wax, and that's part of the burnout. But I think you're right. I think it's that, the spiritual nourishment and the helping them to see what their true beautiful calling is here, and how this is them becoming the person they're designed by God to be, that they can then help others see that that's what this is, and that this is it's great. Well, I want to come to all the retreats. I want to come to all of these things. I would like to.
We'll hang out.
I would love,
Hang out.
well, see, it's double, right? Like I get to see my friend, but also I get to come because I think that that's going to be really neat. I'm so excited about it. Now, do you guys have a
Yeah, and
website yet? Like, are you that organized
so
yet? Or I know you just got there.
yeah, so like I said, we do have a URL that's reserved. So it's orthodoxyouthministries.org. Again, that's plural. So
Plural.
orthodoxyouthministries.org. And you can go there and you'll see that it's coming soon. So we're going to have an official launch on September 1st, but we're currently working on it. We just brought on a communications manager who's designing the website and all this different stuff. And it looks great. I'm so excited for what's coming when it finally goes live.
Great.
So yeah, awesome. I think it's going to be great. And my hope again is really that whatever we put there will be just a resource to pastors, to youth workers, to parents. We don't want to like come in and take over people's territory. Like, here, you're doing it all wrong. Let us show you how to do it better. Right. Like that's no part of where I'm coming from with any of this. But how do we walk alongside pastors, youth workers, and parents to help them become the pastors, youth workers, and parents that God designed them to be, that God made them to be, so that they can more fully equip their youth and young adults to encounter Christ and body His church and engage the world in His name. I mean, to me, that's really the aim here. So that's why I'm like really interested in the personhood of the pastor, of the youth worker, and of the parent.
I think that's beautiful. I think it's such a wonderful approach to be taking, and I think it's going to be great, Christian. I'm so excited about it, and I hope that in your other life, with the counseling and the parenting and the husbanding, I hope that everything is going well for you. In addition to this, is that correct? The 3 kids are doing well. You're good.
It'd be awkward if I said otherwise right now at this point.
Right? Actually, because there's like 2 minutes left. In 2 minutes, family's good. Okay.
Yeah, family's great. We're very happy. We're very, 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 like, so happy.
You know what, though? I mean, nobody's that happy, right? But that's okay, right? Like, I was just lately, somebody asked me how I was doing. I said, you know what? I am doing well enough. Like, I'm doing well enough for today. And she was like, that's what I'm going to say from now on. Mm-hmm. Like, are you guys doing well enough?
I love the word enough. I love the word enough because it doesn't imply too much and it doesn't imply too little. It's enough, right? Like, too much is not enough. If everything was like super, super awesome, that's not enough. That's too much or something. So I love the word enough. And yeah, we are, thank God. I mean, like, everything is really quite wonderful. And I'm excited to go eat dinner with them right after we're done.
Excellent. Well, go, Christian, and enjoy your dinner. And thank you so much for joining us tonight. I'm excited to see what you guys do. And as different programs launch and different things happen, please come back on the show and let's talk about them and get the word out, because I know you're going to do great things. And I'm so excited about it.
Yes, I'm super pumped. So thank you again. And for anyone who's listening who wants to see more what we're doing, you can go to orthodoxyouthministries.org, or you can even just email me at cgonzalez, that's CGONZALEZ, at orthodoxyouthministries.org. If you want to figure out a way to get involved or whatever, just to kind of see what to expect from us, please feel free to reach out to me.
Oh, that's excellent. You're going to get an email from me tonight. All right.
Yes.
That's fantastic. Okay, Christian, we will all be praying for you and for this ministry, that, that it may be blessed and that it may do all of the things that we're hoping it'll do. So thank you for all of your service as always, and we'll talk to you soon. And thank you also to our audience for joining us tonight to get to know another Everyday Orthodox Christian. Come back next Sunday night and we'll meet somebody else. We'll see you then. So much for joining us tonight. What a great show. I love talking to Christian Gonzalez as always. And up